Hi, my name is Maria, and I'm going to be presenting on community security in the context of Dillingham, Alaska. A quick overview of Dillingham. Dillingham is located in the northern part of Bristol Bay, and its population definitely changes year round. So, throughout the entire course of the year, there's usually about 2,300 people there. But in the summer, there's a lot of people coming into the community for fishing as well as tourism, and the population grows to about 5,000 to 8,000 people. Dillingham is located next to the Wood-Tikchik State Park, so that brings a lot of people there for ecotourism and other kinds of opportunities besides commercial fishing, which is a big staple to the Bristol Bay economy. Historically, Dillingham has been occupied by a few different tribes, including the Athabascans and the Eskimos. And then it was a Russian trading post for a while, where there kind of became a hub there, and people decided to settle in the area as well as travel there regularly, and then it became an Orthodox mission site. In 1918 to 1919, there was a big influenza epidemic all over, and it really impacted this community, bringing down the growing population to only about 500 people. However, one positive outcome of this epidemic was the building of an orphanage and a hospital only a few miles away from where currently the city of Dillingham sits. In 1963, it became an incorporated city under the American Alaskan government, and today there's about a 60% native population in Dillingham. There's really native and non-native people there. And the Kuryong Native Village Council is located in Dillingham. It's fairly isolated and accessible by air and boat. It's a little over an hour to fly to Anchorage or from Anchorage to Dillingham. And there is a 38, I believe, 30 something mile paved road that is maintained by the Department of Transportation going to Aleknagik. And I apologize for that pronunciation, but it's not connected to the major road system in Alaska. The aspect of security that I'm looking at in this case study is community security, which is defined as the protection from and absence of threats to a group. And really, self identification of that group is key to the community security because that helps categorize threats as the result of outside and inside actors. And community insecurity is really just the breakdown of that intended social structure or the order. So the normal functioning of that group uh, looks like social cohesion, maintaining of social relationships, both within families, neighborhoods, and just larger community groups, as well as the ability to grow peacefully and to sustain development. Harm to a member of the community is also translated to harm to the group. So that's why government will invest itself in the safety of its citizens and the safety of its residents so that the group as a whole can function and prosper. Evaluation of community security attempts to look at that degree of breakdown in order from threats and the harm that it causes and attach it to tangible metrics to measure it. So, an assessment of the threats that faced Dillingham really was difficult because there's not a lot of information on non-environmental threats to Dillingham. There's quite a bit on the economy as well as the climate, but there isn't much considering the government and the local social groups. But it's very similar to a lot of other Alaskan contexts, so I just took some knowledge and research done on Alaska in general and am applying it to Dillingham. There's high instances of domestic violence, particularly against Native women, tend to be targets. There's mental health issues, lots of substance abuse, both drugs and alcohol. There's prescription drug abuse as well as marijuana, and then more like cocaine and heroin, especially opioids. Violent crime is a big problem in Alaska. A lot of it is tied to instances of drug violence. And there's a lot of other deaths occurring from overdosing. Accidental injuries occur in Dillingham, especially in the summer when the population grows and there's a lot of people out in the bay. There can be work-related fishing incidents. Isolation definitely impacts the degree of harm that can be caused by all these other kinds of threats because it takes so long to reach larger communities or to fly people out to Anchorage for more intensive care or just to draw on outside resources. There's also a lack of resources within the area for public safety programs, as well as very little accountability in terms of safeguards. A lot is dependent on the Bristol Bay Native Association, as well as city government, but there isn't a lot of information on accountability programs or just kind of civilian input into government aside from direct job opportunities. The cyclical population changes also make it difficult to accurately measure statistics. So if you find some kind of statistic on Dillingham, it's hard to know at what point in the year it's talking about. If residents are included, if seasonal residents are included, it really is just difficult to find accurate information that's useful. So I came up with 5 metrics to measure community security that can be applied to Dillingham and to other Alaskan um, and communities. One would be the presence or distance from a state trooper station, as well as the presence of municipal or tribal police. So the state troopers have a lot of training as well as resources from the state that can influence the abilities of local police officers to respond to emergencies, and also that response time is key. So I'll talk about Dillingham's specific instance later, but they actually have a post in Dillingham that then sends out officers to other nearby areas. Secondly, the presence of emergency medical service personnel as well as their level of certification. So EMS 1, 2, 3, as well as the different types of resources that they have. So the equipment and the trucks and stuff can influence the security of the people around them. The violent crime rate, as well as substance abuse rates, and these can be highly connected to one another. And then also the presence of an active civilian safety commission, so they have to have some kind of degree of authority that can act as a safeguard to verify that information coming from government sources is actually accurate and reflecting the needs and vulnerabilities of the population that they serve. Applying this evaluation to Dillingham, again, comes with some note about availability of information. I couldn't find a lot out there. But what I do have is this. There is this Alaska State Trooper post, which is part of Detachment C, so that kind of serves the larger regional area, with headquarters in Anchorage, that serves Dillingham and the rest of Bristol Bay. And then the Dillingham Police Department has about 15 to 19 officers that are regularly employed there. However, later I'll talk about they have other issues with the department, including high turnover rates. The local volunteer and fire and rescue team serves Dillingham. They have about 23 people that do fire and rescue, and are certified for both, as well as 6 people dedicated solely to fire response and 6 solely to rescue. And a lot of these volunteer firefighters are doing it on a part-time basis or a rolling basis. So they may work for 2 weeks, go home to spend 2 weeks with their families, and then come back, or just do it on a part-time basis. So that is kind of like a loose estimate of the number of personnel that may be employed at any time. The rescue people are trained in ambulance procedure as well as certified emergency medical technicians and EMS levels 1, 2, and 3. And a lot of the city is actually investing in EMS personnel. If you are willing to go through the training, they'll help you get enrolled in that and potentially even pay for it. They really just are constantly looking for people to fill those EMS roles because it's loosely committed. The 2018 violent crime rate was 1,353.07 per 100,000 people in the population, and that was a 17% decline from 2017. That decline, it's been a trend lately, so violent crime has been going down, but again, those large percentages are going to be cut down from years, so it's not that much smaller, but it is part of a larger declining trend. There was insufficient information on substance abuse, particularly applied to Dillingham, but in terms of Alaska, there's quite a bit out there. The Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration, which is a federal department, reported over 40,000 people ages 12 and older in Alaska reporting that they regularly abuse or are dependent on alcohol, as well as over 19,000 people abusing drugs, again from the ages of 12 and up. So this isn't just the adult population, but as well as teenagers. The state troopers also reported that heroin-related overdoses quadrupled from 2009 to 2015 in the state of Alaska. Looking for a public safety commission, I looked through the City of Dillingham's website and tried to find other resources out there mentioning one. I couldn't find anything. I'm not sure if it exists or not, but it just looks like there is regular job opportunities for the police department as well as for more administrative roles within city government. Some root causes of the problems that Dillingham has in relation to these metrics regarding, firstly, police department. They have a really high turnover rate, so they're losing officers very quickly, and that's been a constant problem over the last several decades. They really don't have the funding or the resources to support um, the heavy workload that is assigned to them in this area, just because of the big geographic distribution and the large jurisdiction that they have. So the heavy workload is translated onto officers that work for the department and burns them out. So then they also don't have competitive benefits. So there might be, for example, the Bristol Bay Native Association in the area, or the education department, or like the school district or something that is offering much better work benefits or pay that the police department really can't compete with. So they're constantly training new people and then losing them and being really just under staffed constantly, which really stresses people who have stuck around over the past 10 years. Accidental injuries are a little higher for this region than others, mostly because of the fishing that goes on in the summer months and the population that comes in, kind of taxes the local system, and then leaves. So that really just is part of the economy there. Substance abuse rates are worsened by many different factors, particularly financial insecurity caused by seasonal unemployment. And a lot of these things kind of interlap with each other and make each other worse. So, like the domestic violence and abuse is fueled by mental health issues. Mental health issues may be fueled by domestic violence. They play into one another. As well as the northern climate, lack of diverse economic opportunity or disadvantage can really just worsen other factors and lead into the development of new issues. And throughout all of this, there really is a disproportionate effect on Native populations in the area. So some suggested steps to combat these issues would be increasing funding retention initiatives for the police department to try and keep people after they've trained them, because they're really putting a lot of resources into training people and then losing all that investment. So increasing that return on investment by trying to retain personnel would be beneficial, but that really necessitates more states granted funding for that. Also increasing EMS staff, particularly at a full-time status in the summer months, so that there's a little bit more steady assurance that there will be EMS staff and there won't be any staffing concerns rising up year to year. There could be an increased emphasis on victim assistance outreach, so not only looking at statistics such as violent crime reports, but kind of enabling truthful filing of reports, which feeds into my next point. Only relying on police departments' filing of reports can be problematic, so crossing police reports with 911 calls for assault or abuse help can help identify a gap between the needed response and the actual response. Substance abuse needs to be better measured and studied across the state instead of only looking at the state of Alaska as a whole, especially because it's so large, and maybe looking also at communities that are isolated, such as Dillingham, that doesn't have a connection to the rest of the state by road, how that would be different than other cities such as Anchorage or Fairbanks that are more connected. Other issues that with substance abuse could be treated from the judicial standpoint. So talking about mandatory cooperation with treatment plans, which is kind of already in place, but really reframing that in view of rehabilitative focus. So trying to enable people to actually go through with that cooperation instead of strong arming it. As well as seeking grant funding for low-cost treatment plans. So there are some treatment plans in the area and programs, but they're not always accessible to everyone who needs them. So that can help aid in ending addictive cycles, as well as formally recognizing a civilian public safety working group, perhaps modeling it off of other public safety commissions that have some kind of regulatory authority over the police department or ties to the judicial system within the city. But just kind of formatting that and then publishing it so that people can get involved in that and start the needed civilian support for that kind of large-scale reorganization. These are the resources I used. Again, it was difficult to find hard data on Dillingham in particular, uh, but it really is not that difficult to find information on Alaska as a whole, and a lot of the problems that Dillingham has